In this lecture, we're going to be talking about working with automatic thoughts. So let's start with some of the basics. And you'll see three kind of basic questions that we'll ask ourselves when we're working with cognition. And the first is, are our thoughts helpful, accurate, and more specifically, are our clients' thoughts helpful, accurate, balanced, or functional? These are not mutually exclusive categories, so we could see something that might be functional but not helpful, accurate but not balanced. Whatever the case, you can think of these almost as four separate questions if that's easier for you. But if the answer to this question or these questions is no, these thoughts that our clients are experiencing are not helpful, they're not accurate, they're not balanced, they're not functional, we then want to ask ourselves, if not, then how do we modify them? And this is what's referred to often as cognitive restructuring, cognitive modification. Depends on who you're talking to. The terms, in my opinion, are pretty synonymous. So as a therapist, we're going to say, how do we modify these to be more functional, helpful, accurate, balanced for our clients? The second question that we see here, one of the basic questions, and this comes more out of the ACT in behavioral kind of side of dealing with cognitions, is how do we change the function, or can we change the function of our thought processes? So this one gets, I think, conceptually a little bit more confusing to me in some ways, but we're really talking here about our thought serves a purpose. That purpose right now is not leading to my better overall functioning, whether that be behaviorally, emotionally, or both. And so then how can we change the function of that thought? We'll get into that in much more detail later. The other thing that's really important to recognize here, and one of the basic kind of tenets of any work within cognition, is that our thoughts exist at various levels. And you'll hear this referred to in different ways. I'm going to use some of the more common terminology here, but there's a difference between our automatic thoughts, our intermediate beliefs, and our core beliefs and schemas. These also are thought to exist at different levels of consciousness. So we have conscious, unconscious, and preconscious thought. Our automatic thoughts are those that, in general, come rapidly. The term automatic there isn't purposeful. Right? They come without our really kind of knowing them, acknowledging them. They're often abbreviated. Something could happen to me and I go, oh, shit, right? Well, that's an automatic thought. It occurs to me very rapidly. And until someone probes, like, well, what does that mean? Like, why did you respond that way? I may not understand the greater depth of that automatic processing and that automatic thought level. The intermediate belief level, and you'll hear me refer to this in class a lot, intermediate beliefs, I think of these as the meaning-making structures of our thought processes. If I say to you, this thing just happened, how do you make sense of it? What does it mean about you? What does it mean about your situation? What does it mean about the person that you're with? That's intermediate belief level thought, right? And why I call them meaning-making structures is when I answer those questions, I'm interpreting what the meaning of that situation is for me, for my future, for other people, about relationships, whatever it is. I'm trying to make sense of that. I think a lot of what we do in therapy actually works at the intermediate belief level, where we're often dealing with clients who have come to think about things in a certain way, and we're encouraging them to think in different ways that might be more functional, helpful, beneficial to them. And then we have our core belief level or schema level processing. Core beliefs are these fundamental beliefs that we hold about ourselves, about the world, about the future, about relationships, et cetera, et cetera. I could go on and kind of keep naming things, but these are these kind of core foundational beliefs that we have about ourselves. They're often formed very early in our relationship. They may go unexamined and unexplored throughout a lot of our lives because we just believe them. That's what we were taught. That's what we believe. That's the way life is. Part of our good therapeutic work is working at this kind of core belief level and kind of making some fundamental change. If I had a good ability to do this, which I don't in this format, I would throw this up on a board for you and I would say to you, look, almost all of these thoughts can be either conscious, unconscious, or preconscious. And the difference is consciously, if I say, you know what, I struggle with this belief that I'm unlovable. Well, I know that. I have that belief system. That could also be an unconscious belief that I have, that every time a relationship ends, it gets triggered, and I'm not really sure that it's there. And it could be a preconscious. Preconscious is the one I talk honestly the least about. Preconscious is kind of something that I could bring into consciousness, but I don't have it in my conscious awareness right now. If you ask the example, I don't know why, but I always use this example of like, if you ask me what I had for breakfast, I could tell you, even though I'm not thinking about it right now. It's preconscious. Like I have the ability to kind of tap into it relatively easily, but I'm not necessarily thinking about it right now. We don't talk a lot about that, but whatever. It is what it is. It's one of those kind of cognitive concepts that's out there. So because we're dealing with automatic thinking in those thoughts that are most readily accessible to us, I want to introduce you to what often is considered the kind of key question when we're doing good cognitive therapy in particular, or cognitive behavioral therapy. And that is this question of like, what was running through your mind? What were the thoughts running through your mind prior to experiencing a specific emotion? This question is worded intentionally to key a client into the thing that was prior to their experiencing an emotional reaction specifically. And so we really want to indicate to our clients this idea that your emotion precedes a particular thought or a particular thought process. And part of our therapeutic work is for you to identify and bring those thoughts into your conscious awareness. There are a number of other good prompts for you, and this is out of the One Soul reading. It's page 91. So some of our clients may be really, really good at doing this. They may be really kind of attuned to it. Sometimes they're not. So we might have to ask them, for example, well, do you think you were thinking this thought, right? I just got a bad grade on a test. Do you think you were thinking, oh, I must be doing really well in this class? And they're like, well, no, right? So sometimes using that kind of idea of something different than what they probably were thinking will help them to identify what they actually were thinking. So I would encourage you, as I said to you, a number of the readings that I have selected for you include both transcripts, and these articles that you read this week have a lot of transcripts in them. Don't skip over them, read them. On page 91, I would actually jot down the various prompts that are there because you'll use them in your therapy. So one other ones that I'm looking at right now, I use this a lot with my therapy clients, where I say to them, if a friend or family member were in that situation, what do you think they would think, right? Or what do you think they would think about your thoughts? Oftentimes, kind of that ability to step outside of our own awareness, our own processing of information, kind of gives us good access and good information about our own processing. So let's look at one way to deal with automatic thoughts or thoughts in therapy. And this is typically referred to as the automatic thought record or the dysfunctional thought record. And this is a commonly used cognitive behavioral therapeutic tool. I like to think of it as more flexible than it's typically described and more flexible than what you read about in your readings for the week. You can use the structure in the form as you see in your readings, or you could actually just have your clients engage in a discussion about this, or have them record it using a format that they find more comfortable and more appropriate. Like me personally, I don't love the columns. I find them hard to write in and hard to kind of work with, so I don't like to use them myself personally. Other people kind of do. You have an automatic thought record and a sample of an automatic thought record um, on the website that you can use. The one in your reading is found on page 94. So you can use that. You can find a lot of them online if you want to. But let's talk about what the automatic thought record is and the basics of how you want to do this. And the first thing is for your clients to record a number of different things, and these are in the different columns on the traditional automatic thought record. But one is the situation, the second is the automatic thoughts or the thoughts associated with that situation, the emotions that arise, the behavior that occurs either in simultaneously with the emotion or after the emotion. And then what I say is the body, which means like what is the physiological response, if any physiological response that goes along with these. I particularly use the physiological response and the body response when I'm talking about anxiety, because as any of you know that have experienced anxiety, which is all of us, your body responds to that anxiety. One important thing to point out here is the difference between a situation and the rest. Clients will often get this confused because the situation could be like you're sitting here listening to a pre-recorded lecture and all of a sudden you start to feel anxiety. It's like, well, wait, nothing, you know, Dr. Ha is saying it provokes anxiety. And so the situation could be very independent. I'm sitting here listening to this lecture and all of a sudden I start thinking about an important meeting that I have tomorrow morning. And so the actual thought that's occurring with the anxiety is not related to the situation I'm in, but in fact the idea and thought about the meeting that I have tomorrow. So it's really important to kind of distinguish that with your clients and to talk to them about the fact that the situation and the resulting emotion and feeling may very well be independent from one another. It could also be related, right? So anyways, I'll leave that at that. So what do you do once those things are recorded? And again, this sounds like it's simple. This is nothing at all simple about any of this, by the way. So I give this to my clients. I say to them, I want you to record these for a week. I want you to pay attention to your emotions, record all these various variables, and they bring it back to you in therapy. And we'll go through this in class together. Where do you start? You know, let's say you're really, really lucky and your client is really, really motivated and they bring back 5 different um, situations that they were in. And one of the things that you're going to have them do, and I don't think this is in your reading anywhere, but one of the things you're going to have them do when they record this emotion is you're going to go, I want you to rate your emotion. And in our collaborative atmosphere, I go, I want you to rate that on a scale of 0 to 10, 0 to 5, 0 to 100, 0 to 60. I don't care what it is. You pick the scale. And they pick 0 to 10. And you go, all right, you've got 5 things, each of them recorded on a scale of 0 to 10. Why don't we start with something that you picked at like a 4? I don't want to start with 10 because 10 is probably going to be really hard for you to think about. The 2 is going to probably be not all that important to you. Let's pick a 4. And I'm being arbitrary here, but you get the idea. I'm not going to pick the thing that is going to trigger you the most. I'm not going to pick the thing that is least emotional, least triggering to you. I'm going to pick something that feels more manageable. And you might even say, I do this with my clients all the time, like, where would you like to start? What do you think is a place that would be important for you to start? And if they pick 10, I might go, you know what? I can see why you might want to pick that because it's really, really important to you and it seemed like really hard to you. I wonder if picking something at a lower level might be more manageable for us to start with and help you kind of learn some of the skills that we're talking about. So that's the collaborative atmosphere that we've been talking about all semester and we'll continue to talk about. Once I select the situation, once I select the series of thoughts, I'm going to then look at what is the evidence. And there are prompts here in your reading to kind of examine this. But what is the evidence? What's the evidence for, against the thought that you're having? I'm going to check in on the attributions. Are you making appropriate attributions about what's going on? I'm going to look at are your thoughts accurate? I'm going to assess possible versus probable. Is it possible that I might win the lottery if I play it? Yes. Is it probable? No. What's the possibility? I don't know. It's just possible. What's the probability? I don't know. 1 in a million? Okay. So if I'm getting really excited about the 1 in a million chance, not great. And I'm going to look at the functionality as we've continued to talk about. What's the purpose? What's the function of that? And how do I assess that? Once I've evaluated those things, and this is, you'll hear the word Socratic questioning. I use Socratic questioning a lot in class, where I like ask you guys to think about it, or I pose a question to you, or I give you a prompt and ask you to think about it. That's an example of Socratic questioning, where I'm trying to get you to generate the information versus me giving you the information. And it's a style of teaching, it's a style of questioning in psychotherapy that kind of allows the client to come to the answers via your guidance, but not giving them the answers. So I'm going to ask them about those things. We're going to evaluate those things together. We're going to look at alternative explanations, alternative attributions, and we're going to come to a modified thought or modified thoughts, interpretations, beliefs about a situation. And in the magic question, I didn't put this on here, but the magic question I'm going to ask at the end of all that is I'm going to go back and I'm going to say, hey, now that we've come to this alternative thought, this alternative thinking, this alternative way of considering the situation, do you feel differently when you think that way? This is a tricky question. You would expect the answer to go, yeah, of course. I feel much better. Sometimes clients, in my experience, will say, no, I don't feel any different. And that's where I have to go, well, do you believe the modified explanation or interpretation or belief that we've come to? And they're like, no, I really don't. I'm like, okay, so it's not that you're not feeling different, it's that you don't believe the thing that we're talking about. And then we have a whole nother discussion beyond the scope of what we're talking about right now. But it's really, really important to assess that. Once we've gone through this and we've developed these kind of alternative ways of thinking about, making sense of, etc., the situation that you're in, do you feel different? And if a client isn't feeling different, then something's going wrong there. A final reminder here before I close this lecture. There's lots of transcripts in the readings that you have for this week, and as I've said to you before, I try to include readings that have transcripts. There's a lot of like practical information, a lot of how-tos in here that we haven't covered in this lecture. I would encourage you, as you're reading these things now and in the coming weeks, is to remind yourself of like, oh, I should make note of that. That's something that I can use. That's something I can go back to and refer to as I start my clinical work and my clinical practice. So I'll just kind of just remind you of that and bring your attention to that as you continue through these readings.